OTIP, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel, leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste, brother. And just before we even get started with the history piece, which we traditionally do, just wanted to mention the last show when we was talking about Dr. Khalid Muhammad. I was talking about his situation and how the august body of the Congress of the United States had sanctioned him with a 99-0 vote. And I forgot the term that was used, that's used when that happens, because that's illegal. The American government, even though it borrowed these laws from England, and this is British law that was being practiced, they forbidded themselves from executing the law called the Bill of Attainder. And that's a law where august body will sanction a person and classify them as guilty without a trial or hearing. So that's what Alton H. Maddox, attorney at law, attorney at war, he went through that in New York State, where he was sanctioned by the state legislature, giving a hearing, was not giving a trial, and yet was classified as guilty of something. They don't know what he was guilty of, but they took his law license. Where on a national level, the federal government sanctioned Dr. Khalid Muhammad based on his speech. They did not give him a hearing. He did not receive a trial. Consequently, through the Bill of Attainder, which they said is illegal, he was sanctioned, thereby opening up the door for him to be assassinated or killed. And when that's done in a way where there will be no investigation. You are guaranteed with a surety that when the Bill of Attainder is enacted, because it's a death sentence, Congress said you're dead. Consequently, any enemies, black or white, or any Negroes working for whites can now come in to an open door and do whatever they choose to do to Dr. Khalid Muhammad, because it was sanctioned by the government. There would be no investigation. And as you well know, there was no investigation. The evidence that was on the scene was all destroyed or taken away from Dr. Khalid Muhammad. So I'm sorry, and pardon me that I forgot the proper term, because those who investigate and follow up on things that we say, I forgot that is called the Bill of Attainder.
And Michael, before we proceed with the historical part, that was an unprecedented step for Congress to take against a citizen of the United States simply for making a speech that some of them found objectionable, wasn't it?
That's the first time ever that a private citizen was sanctioned that way, because it's against the law. They took British law, but they scrapped that because it will cause a citizen, a civilian outside their jurisdiction and without cause to be killed. That's why, even though that was practiced in England, after they extricated themselves from England and formed what is customarily called the United States of America, they forbidden anybody to use that, but they used it in the case of Dr. Khalid Muhammad, which led obviously to his death.
And my final note on that is that some considered his speech to be a hate speech. And when you think of the long history of the United States of America with hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, it's some of the speeches that have been made in the history of the United States of America. You talk about hate, is sort of contradictory to even think that Minister Khalid Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was the first one to be charged of giving the hate speech and thereby sanctioned. When you think about all of the hate speeches that have been made by everyone from government officials to private citizens in this country's long history of hate. But as is customary, we want to zoom forward to our historical piece. On February 3rd, 1870, was the signing of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution. One of the things this amendment is allegedly supposed to assure is the right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or by any state on account of race, color, et cetera, et cetera. Michael, talk about the 15th Amendment of the Constitution.
Well, you've covered the bases. The only thing I'll add to it is that this was for Black men. Black men 5 years earlier engaged in a war of wars that made America one country, the Civil War. Consequently, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are considered Civil War amendments. And that amendment gave Black men the right to vote. Black women would not be allowed to vote until 50 years later. That's when white women got the right to vote. Consequently, white women had always been at war with Black men. Ergo, Secretary Hillary Clinton and Senator Barack Hussein Obama, that war had occurred because white women never forgave white men for it taking 50 years after Black men. So Black men could actually vote in America before white women. And so it took Black women another 50 years along with white women to legally be able to vote in all the states in America. And
for point of clarification, I'm pretty sure your comments relate to legally wise, because of the signing of the 15th Amendment of the Constitution. We know the history of the United States, and the attempt to thwart the ability for Black men to actualize, their freedom of citizenship by voting. You can go all the way through 1965, and I think the Voters' Right Act needed to be signed. So, although there was a document that was signed, and I'm pretty sure there were places, during the Reconstruction era where Black men did vote and did take advantage of this particular amendment, but it wasn't, nationwide, and it didn't exist in all counties and all jurisdictions. There were counties, of course, as we know, historically speaking, where Black men still had to fight, for their right to vote, even after the 1870 15th Amendment of the Constitution.
Well, it's a little difficult to be able to vote when two guys are sitting in front of the voting station with shotguns and daring you to walk in there and vote. So it presents problems. Certainly when you break it down, the states, cities, counties, certainly we could not vote after 1870 anywhere. And it was at the permission of that locality, obviously, because the Ku Klux Klan, white citizens councils, white militias, normal, friendly, everyday whites did not allow Black people to vote. Whether liberal or conservative or any other fake title that they have, Black men were not allowed to vote. As you say, that's why it took further civil rights action, literally 80, 90 years later, to guarantee us the right to vote. And it's still not guaranteed because of the way they gutted, civil rights legislation as of lately. So you don't have the right to vote everywhere. And just remember, one little note added, when Senator Obama ran for the first time in 2008, you have to remember there was a district in Harlem where he received one vote, and Secretary Clinton got the other, I guess, 99% of that vote. So somehow, even when Black people voted in droves for Obama, when the count came, well, the count is done and supervised by the police department. Obama had one vote in that district, if you recall.
All right, then on February 4th, 1913, we have the birthday of one of our sheroes, Rosa Parks.
Well, we've talked about her quite often, and just want to say that she stood up. You can say whatever you want about, well, was standing up, sitting down significant? Yes, it was. It was history changing for her to face a bus driver at that time. And people don't realize that some bus drivers were authorized to carry guns at that time. So you actually were dealing with a peace officer who was threatening her and attempted to throw her off the bus. Now that bus was stopped, and certainly a police officer came on and they removed her and arrested her. But just remember, she was facing an irate bus driver with a gun. So keep that in mind when you think of Rosa Parks, that she had the heart to change history.
All right. We would be remiss if we also didn't mention this being the month of February. Many of us know that this month is designated as Black History Month. And we do have to mention Carter G. Woodson, African-American historian. He wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And those individuals, and he deemed it important because our history was not told at that time, neither is it told at this time. And there's, the little history that is taught. You have a movement now where they're attempting to eradicate our history out of classes because some people find it offensive. But Michael, talk about this great hero, Carter G. Woodson.
Oh, he was fantastic when you think about it. Carter G. Woodson, who got his bachelor's from Berea College, got his master's from the University of Chicago, got his PhD from Harvard University. He was the second Black man, and that was in 1912. He was the second Black man. Obviously, W.B. Du Bois was the first to get his PhD specifically from Harvard University, and Carter G. Woodson was second. Now, he was the one who shortly thereafter developed. He got together with colleagues. It was the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and that was in 1926. Thereafter, in honoring Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, he decided on a Negro History Week that in February, because people often wonder and say, why February? It's the coldest month and it's the shortest month. But that was because, as the story goes, he was actually honoring Abraham Lincoln, who many to this day mistakenly believe he freed the African slaves here in America, and they honoring Frederick Douglass, whose birthday is this month. So that's why it's in February, not because it's the shortest month or the coldest month.
And when you talk about African history, just a short note, the huge amount of information that is intentionally not taught, not only to our children, but other children, is not included in world history. I remember when I was a youngster in high school and grade school, and they talk about world history, they start with the Greeks, and then they go towards with the Roman Empire up until modern history. But when you talk about African history, which came before the Greeks, thousands of years before Greeks, there was an African history, there was African civilization. That information, as well as current information about history in this country, Carter G. Woodson and other African historians thought it was definitely important to teach that, to share that, to spread that. They noted the significance in it being left out when individuals talk about history, that our history was intentionally deleted, from people's, recantation of historical events and the advancement of civilization.
Yeah, Carter G. Woodson himself said after going to Harvard, because Harvard is, can you imagine if Harvard is so respected now, how it was 100 years ago? And he said himself that it took him 20 years to clear his eyes up on what he was taught at Harvard. So for 20 years, he walked around with skewed vision, and he could not see the world as an African. It took him over 20 years, between 20 and 30 years, to clear his mind to think right. So for him to be able to do that, and then a lot of us call it Black History Month because in 1976, it was President Gerald Ford who classified officially February as Black History Month, but obviously the East that was here in Brooklyn, they were already having major celebrations. Certainly in Harlem, they had already had First World and others who were already designating February. So many other places where Blacks were doing it already, but on an official level, as history would tell it, their history, they would tell you that Gerald Ford is the one who made it official. But Black folks who were already exercising it we're the ones that made it official because we were doing that without white permission or white approval.
Or white acknowledgement. All right,
Or
thank you for that, Michael. All right, fast forward, we have some old business we wanted to talk about. Many may remember Officer Jason Van Dyke, who was found guilty and sentenced for the murder of Laquan Daniels. This happened in Chicago. Well, you know, unfortunately, he's up for to be released next month. Michael.
Yeah, unfortunately, we talked about this years ago at his trial and at his conviction, Noel. Now, we knew when they just gave him basically 7 years, 81 months, that was too light a sentence for second-degree murder. He had second-degree murder and 16 counts of aggregated battery. In other words, for 16. Each round that he put, 16 counts of aggravated battery, and that was for the 16 rounds that he put in Laquan McDonald's body. Now, the first few rounds, he was hit standing upright. Laquan McDonald went down immediately, and he continued shooting, putting rounds into Laquan McDonald's body to show you how vicious he was. Laquan was walking away. For those, just to bring it up, what happened. He was walking away. 4 police officers were walking towards Laquan McDonald. This 17-year-old child, remember, 17-year-old child was walking away from them. Only one police officer drew his weapon, and that was Jason Van Dyke, and he emptied a magazine into a 17-year-old child and then had the temerity to lie later and say it was self-defense because Laquan McDonald came at him with a knife. Now, as you well know, it was a Burger King, I believe, or one of those hamburgers.
Yeah, Burger King.
That photographed, their cameras photographed the entire event. Look, the mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, that's President Obama's former chief of staff, who illegally got permission from the Justice Department under Obama so that he could run for mayor. Well, he ran for mayor. One, he covered this up and forbade the family and the public from seeing the video footage until he was reelected. At that point, he allowed the people to see it once he got back in office as mayor. Now, it was a federal judge that ordered it. A federal judge ordered that the family receive permission, and after the family, for the public to see that footage. And that's where we saw that vicious murder, because he's a convicted murderer. A vicious murder of McDonald by Van Dyke. Your thought?
And it was the video footage, Michael, that Mayor Emanuel attempted to hide from the public that really proved the officer lied, you know, because it's a clear video footage of what happened, and the officer's version of what happened and the need for him to use deadly physical force was found to be a lie. It's found to be a perjury. So, you know, for him to receive 7 years for a conviction of 16 of felonious assaults, as well as a murder, a homicide, you know, we didn't feel that was justice. And, you know, as many cases, many people sentenced to state prison, get out after serving half the time for good behavior. So for his dastardly deed against this 17-year-old young man, he's only have to do approximately 3.5 years, which we feel is not justice. So, you know, he's scheduled to get out soon, and we'll see. Closing comments, Michael, or is that it?
No, we good.
Okay, let's fast forward to the case of Ahmaud Arbery. You know, recently, many of you may have known, there had always been some prosecutorial mismanagement of this case. You know, the prosecutor's office are supposed to be representative of the public, you know, supposed to represent the people. That's why when you're a victim of a crime, you can't hire an attorney to represent you in criminal court. That's the job of the prosecutor. Many of you may know when Ahmaud Arbery was first killed. This is the individual who was killed while he was jogging, and 2 white men or 3 white men approached him. 2 of them, Travis and Gregory McMichael, approached him and wound up killing him. Many may remember initially the prosecutor in the when the incident first happened, attempted to, well, she did encourage police officers not to make an arrest. She ultimately was arrested. That was District Attorney Jackie Johnson. She was subsequently arrested and indicted, but initially, from day one, there was always some prosecutorial mismanagement of this case. From that time, from Attorney Jackie Robinson, who told officers not to arrest the defendants initially, and she was subsequently arrested for obstruction of justice because one of the individuals was an investigator in her office. But today, the prosecutor attempted to make a plea deal with these 2 individuals so that they would serve 30 years of their life sentence in federal jail. Travis and Gregory McMichael wanted to opt out for federal, to do 30 years or most of their time in federal jail as opposed to state jail. Fortunately for the family, they rose up and articulated to the judge that they wanted the opportunity to speak in court so that they can refute this prosecutor's attempt to make a deal with the defendants. Now, normally, when the prosecutor attempts to make a deal with a defendant, they would first discuss it with the family to get their input. And they would, weigh hard on how the family felt, whether or not they decide to make a deal with a defendant. But in this instance, the district attorney, as her predecessor, who was facing obstruction charges, attempt to make a deal and not even consider the family's feelings. So fortunately, the family resisted. They spoke in court to the judge that it is the will of the family that these 2 individuals spend time in state jail as opposed to a federal prison. And Judge Lisa Godby Woods rejected the plea deal that was made by the prosecutor with both Travis and Gregory McMichael. It's a shame that in 2021, you have these instances where prosecutors appear to be more sympathetic to white criminals as opposed to the family of Black victims. Fortunately, this family was outraged. They said to the judge, can we talk to you in court before you even consider accepting this plea deal, because the family objects to it. And fortunately, the judge sided with the family. But once again, this is a really obvious decision of a prosecutor in this particular county to appear to be more sympathetic to defendants as opposed to the victims' families of this victim.
Well, Noel, you're the one that always points out that we should not be clapping when we hear somebody has been arrested and charged. You've always pointed out to look and see how they're being prosecuted, and then obviously the conviction and sentencing. You always point that out, that hold on and pause from clapping, see how they are sentenced.
Yeah.
So now you're gonna have to add another page to that chapter, Noel, you always do, because now you gotta see where they're going to jail at. So you gotta add that to the book.
It's true,
You
facts,
always point out to watch and wait for the sentence. Now you gotta read the fine print and make sure that if it's a state crime, state charge, that they remain in that state as opposed to a federal place where they'll have their own living room and kitchen and all the accoutrements of home in that federal jail, as opposed to supposed more hard time in a state facility.
Yeah, an excellent point, Michael. It seems as if, the more we change and modify our strategies, that they change as well. We always talk about arrest, prosecution, conviction, and sentencing. Now, like you stated, Michael, now we have to talk about the location. Now, some of you may say, well, isn't jail jail? Isn't prison prison? Everyone who's been affiliated with law enforcement knows that federal prisons, the housing situation, as well as the population, is much different from state prison. Federal prisons, even though prison is prison, and none of it is something that anyone looks forward to going, but it's an easier time. The population, the demographics, and everything is totally different in state prison. That's why these individuals opted out for serving at least 30 years of their life sentence in the federal prison because they want an easier time. But as you stated, Michael, this family fortunately didn't go away. They were still on it. When they heard that this deal was being made, they objected, they appealed to the judge for an opportunity to articulate their sentiments as it relates to this particular deal that the prosecutor made without consulting the family. And they were able to go to a judge, and the judge rejected the district attorney's deal because he listened to the family, you know, the passion that they spoke with, and these individuals will have to do time in state prison. So kudos to the family for not resting, to be ever vigilant and making certain that their loved one, you know, got justice.
Great points, brother.
All right, we want to go to Oklahoma. Michael, there's a bill in Oklahoma where legislatures are attempting to make it illegal to take photos of police officers while the police officers are taking police action. This is ridiculous. We understand that in the past few years, many police officers have been convicted of murder. Many police officers have been prosecuted for assault. Many police officers are doing time, as ones that we talked about on this program, because of the video footage that showed their guilt, that proved their guilt. Without these video footage, without these cameras and these videos, we wouldn't know what happened. We would only be able to go with the officers' recantation of their actions. And as you know, police officers are very capable of creating stories. But when there's no video footage, all you have is the officer's version of what happened. Because of these videos, because of the sentencing, the outrage of the public, because of this new awareness now many people have of how officers actually deal with members of the Black community, there's a movement to try to obstruct individual citizens from taking video footage of police officers interacting with the public. And this is one of the first steps to make it illegal for individuals to take photos. Now, I think it's outrageous. As long as a person is in safe distance from the police officer, as long as a person is not obstructing the police officers from doing their duty, I think it's the epitome of ridiculous to make it illegal for that person to do that. Michael, your comments on this.
Well, you know, whether you go back as far back to Rodney King, Oklahoma is knee deep in so many horrendous police acts against Blacks that I could see why they did it. I'm not justifying it in any way, but I know the thinking behind that. And this is why Governor Kevin Stitt signed that bill into law, where it is illegal now and you can be charged for not only filming it, but certainly if you post it, that's illegal now. And the same thing is going on in Arizona as we speak. They not only can you not photograph, but you have to be 15 feet away at all times. So just imagine, if you will, the last story we were talking about, Chicago. How would we have known or had evidence that Chicago police officers went into Burger King, confiscated the tapes right there in Burger King? Well, people had cameras out. I mean, you know, cell phones with cameras. Now, we wouldn't have known that police officers surveyed the area, looked where there might have been cameras aimed at that episode, and they were able to confiscate it. And they went right into a Burger King, which was open, and actually went to the manager and took the video footage. So that has happened. We know that happened in Ahmaud Edwards, right here in New York City. Tapes were confiscated. So at least if you have your cell phone, you can't interrupt a police officer, even though he's confiscating evidence. But at least from a distance, you can photograph what he's doing and say later, I saw 3-4 cops go in Burger King and take something. They went into the manager's office, got a tape and walked out. with a tape. So if you can't do that, what kind of world are we going to have? We're going to have a world where Chicago police officers were so comfortable. You saw Chicago police kill a guy and then step on him. In a different case other than Laquan McDonald. And here, that's the boldness. That's the boldness that you saw in the case where you could actually have your knee on a civilian for 9 minutes on his neck, killing him in plain view. That's the arrogance of law enforcement. Consequently, if that wasn't videotaped, guess what? On paper, it never happened.
Right. And we know that police officer will always add context to their action, and it's always going to be presented in a way where their actions were justified. So everyone should see that this is just a mere attempt for authorities to deny information to the public. Everyone says the camera doesn't lie. If your actions are appropriate, if you follow protocol and the law, no one should mind or be afraid of being videotaped. But it's at the times where police officers are acting inappropriate, when they're not satisfied with their actions being revealed, because then they can't add, commentary to their action because the video doesn't lie. So I think it's preposterous. They added a little notation on this law. They just said that if you videotape it with threat, that is something that they're going to hold you accountable for legally. So the objective is really to intimidate people from filming police officers, and it really makes absolutely no sense at all if a person from a safe distance from a police officer, not in any way, shape, or form, to record it, publicize it, or give it to the families to make that that makes absolutely no sense. And everyone knows that the objective is to intimidate the public and the individuals from photographing police officers so many times when they act criminally in terms of doing their job. That's the objective. And anytime you have citizens who are legislatures or public officials criminalizing something that's not criminal, making a crime something that's not a criminal act, I think that's the epitome, and that's the rotting of a system. That shows that your system is rotting at the core. People should really be alarmed at that, because I think that's going to be the move. Mike, you said that's happening in Arizona as well?
Yes.
I think there's a lot of jurisdictions that's attempted to implement similar policies. So we'll keep the viewing audience apprised of that. Also, Michael, President Biden has announced that he's going to appoint a Black female to the Supreme Court. One of the Supreme Court members stated they were going to step down, and Joe Biden, when he was candidate Joe Biden, stated that he was going to appoint a Black female to the Supreme Court. And some individuals in society have been critical of him because he pointed out there's going to be a Black female. Of course, they're attempting to suggest that that's reverse discrimination, which is ridiculous. But Michael, what are your feelings on the opportunity for him to now appoint a Black female, which will be the first Black female appointed to the Supreme Court?
Well, it'll be a first, and obviously, you never trust elected officials that look for first.
It's Justice Stephen Breyer who's stepping down.
Right. And the thing you have to remember is that the Democratic Party is in trouble right now. He's thinking about the midterm elections and him being reelected in 3 years from now. So he knows that the female Black vote was critical in him being president. So I don't know where he's going to draw from, whether it's from judges, trial attorneys, legislators, academicians, civil rights attorneys. I don't know where he's going to draw from, but he had the opportunity to make a Black woman attorney general, but he chose Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States. And Christine Clark has about 2 other people over her besides himself, Merrick Garland, an Indian woman, and I think a white woman. I think she's number 3 in the Justice Department. If he wanted to see justice in a real form, he could have given Christine Clark, a civil rights attorney who's been around for a long time, that job as Attorney General. So this is him pulling a rabbit out of his hat, claiming that he's going to appoint a Black woman to that position. But, it's a good thing because it'll be a first, something that Obama didn't do, which he should have done, as opposed to putting first a Jewish woman, second a Latino woman, and you just have to look and say, what about us? So he's doing what should have been done already. So I don't know about giving him credit for something that should have been done a long time ago.
Also reject Republicans' comment that there's reverse discrimination. I believe all appointments should reflect the community that they serve. So I think it's important because all judges bring their experiences to the court when they make a decision. So I think that's beneficial to be all inclusive. I'm not overly expecting a miracle that this is going to be a great victory for our, condition in this country, because as we stated earlier, we have the vote in 1965, yet in 2022, we're still fighting for voters' rights. It's still an issue. In 2022, we have Brown versus Board of Education, which ruled that separate but equal education was inappropriate, in effect illegal. Yet in 2022, we still have segregated school systems all throughout the country, especially right here, liberal, so-called progressive, so-called multi city. You have the Supreme Court, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution that obstructs police officers against illegal seizures. Yet all the country, African Americans and Latinos are searched and seized, property seized and frisked. So although I think it's a good thing, I don't, because many of these laws, many of these judgments are not, we don't see the effects of them, on the streets, as I stated, these in these three Supreme Court decisions, how it doesn't really trickle down to everyday experience of African Americans. So I'm excited, and I support the appointment of an African American female on the Supreme Court, and it's be a big first. But my expectations are limited. And finally, I'll say, many people don't know, and to some it doesn't make a big difference, but 3 out of the 6 women that he announced, I think, are married to white men. I know his vice president is also not married to an African American man. It's just some that doesn't make a difference, but to some, it seems as if, he has those are the kind of sisters that he a lot of time chooses for these considerations.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what his ultimate choice is. But I just wanted to put that in there as well. Closing comments on that story?
No, you're right, and I was thinking whether I wanted to bring that out, that the people that are at the head of the list have married outside of the race, but you did, so kudos.
Right, and as I stated, that might be a reflection, because it seems as if those are the kind of sisters that he picked. When you look at percentage-wise, most sisters don't. You see more brothers, especially that ascend to upper society, be it athletes, actors, or et cetera, may make that. But there's very few sisters, percentage-wise, that make that move. So when you look at his choices and see that a high percentage of this Black woman that he makes these appointments, marry outside of the race, that's just just a side note.
Right, and Justice Thomas, of course,
Facts. All right. Recently, many of you may be aware, there's a 23-year-old sister named Lorraine Smith Fields. She reportedly met a 37-year-old white man named Matthew LaFonte on Bumble. Well, after their initial meeting, the next day from their encounter, she invited him over her house, and she wound up dead. Police were called. Police responded. Her body was moved to the morgue. And for some reason, this white male that she just met on Bumble, I guess that's a dating website, this white male wasn't brought to the precinct, or he was in question. neither was the family notified. So for 2 days, after the second day, the family, no one heard from him. So they decided to go to her apartment to see, if she was okay. And the neighbor told her, yo, she died. They were surprised. They would say she died. So they called the police. A particular detective that was in charge of this investigation, his name was Cronin. He was so disrespectful to the family. He just brushed the family away. When they asked him what happened, he announced what happened, and he said it was a male in the apartment that she had met on this website, and that he was an investigator. He's not considered a suspect because he's a nice guy, which is ridiculous. And then when the family attempted to make further communications with the detective, he told them, don't call me no more. So dismissive, so disrespectful. And this is a very curious set of circumstances. Investigators, a former sergeant, that if I had a situation where a female wound up dead, and for someone that she met, I don't care if she knew him for a long period of time, he's coming to the precinct and we're going to ask him some questions. But this didn't happen in this particular case. Many believe race played a role. We'll keep our family abreast of this story. The detective was today suspended because, of course, this particular story made the press, and it's an embarrassment to the county, for the police department. So I think a thorough investigation will now commence. But this is another story where, unfortunately, the family had to be vigilant and press it and not let it go in order for their loved one to hopefully receive some form of justice if there was foul play in this particular case. Any comments, Mike?
No, I would just say that when you do not do an investigation, you will get spokespeople for that department, for that police department, to say that his actions were not based on race. Him deciding that there was nothing to look into. That wasn't based on race. Somehow that was based on his level of professionalism, or his ability to discern a crime from a person that's a nice guy. But all too often, when all is said and done, race is a fact in all of this.
Oh, facts. And, of course, they said that there were some drugs in Sister Lorraine Smith's system. But, my concern as an investigator is that, let's say this individual, Matthew LaFontaine, let's say he's a serial killer. Let's say this is not the first person he met on the website, visited, and they wound up dead. So I think it's the epitome of inadequacy for a detective to just not go full tilt with this. And where in the world any of us would think that race didn't play a role in this particular case. And last point is that there was also a second Black female who died the same day. Her name was Brenda Lee Rawls, who died the same day, and her family was also not contacted for days. So evidently there's a problem with the Bridgeport Police Department. It's an embarrassment. The only reason why action is now being taken because it's made the public airways, and that's not how things should go. But we'll keep the family abreast of that particular case. There's an unfortunate incident where in the school system, a child was forced to eat out of a garbage can. Now that shouldn't happen anywhere, but Michael, tell us about that particular story.
Yes, well, obviously the name of the child is not being exposed, but I'll just say the Ohio mother, Letitia Williams, who's the mother, filed a lawsuit against the Lorraine City School District in Ohio and the Board of Education because for forcing her 9-year-old daughter to eat food out of a trash bin. What had happened was the child was served waffles and threw the waffles into the garbage because it was cold and she didn't want them. And she requested, instead of that, they had 2 different choices of the meal. Once, since she didn't want the waffles, she went to the principal and asked the principal, who was there in the cafeteria, could she have something, the other meal, as opposed to the waffles? And the principal in turn told her no. And the teacher, they both told her to take those waffles out of the garbage and forced her to eat it. and had the entire class watch her. They surrounded her. She had to take the waffles out of a garbage bin, and then she had to eat it while the children there were laughing at her, her classmates. And so you could say that wasn't based on race, but the principal as well as the teacher were both white, and this child was black. And so it wasn't good enough to force her to eat, or just to say, you're going to go without eating today because you threw it in the garbage. But they had her classmates stand around her while she was crying and forced her to eat waffles out of a garbage bin. So, you know, again, you can say all you want, well, y'all mention race too much. This is why we do, because these things go unaddressed too often. This should be the headline opening every newscast in the country, when a principal who I would imagine probably has at least what, a PhD or a master's, and a teacher that probably has at least a master's also. So they've gone to school, they have the education, and this is what it translates to: a heinous, I dare say, criminal act like that. No. So of course we're gonna mention it, because we will protect 9-year-old little girls or little boys when that happened to them, and bring that to the proper authorities' attention. So yes, we bringing it up, and it is tantamount to a crime in my opinion, and certainly who knows what the parents, given all the areas you could explore, what the parents might do once they see something like that happen to their child.
And you can imagine the emotional impact that that will forever have on the child. But I mean, the activities of these adults, you know, as you stated, you know, they're educators, you know, they have, you know, they have achieved academic success. You would think that they would know how to treat a child. I mean, that's not appropriate behavior for anybody. But I think it was the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, you know, who one time said that if they don't teach you right, you better believe that they're not going to treat you right. And right. This is inappropriate treatment of a child to a highest order. I'll be interested to know what they were charged with, but there definitely should be some child abuse charges involved in what they did, because it's highly inappropriate. We know the type of germs and diseases that she can pick up, you know, not even talking about the emotional impact that it's going to have on her, but the kind of germs and the position they put her in health-wise by forcing her to eat something that was thrown in the garbage. I mean, highly inappropriate, criminal.
Well, I think because of the lawsuit now, the principal has been removed as well as the teacher. Now, I don't know if it's a suspension or they've been outright fired, but only because of the lawsuit that the lawyer brought against the school and the Board of Education itself did the Board of Education have to act. So right now, they have been removed from their positions only because of the lawsuit.
Right, and I'll be interested.
The district had not done anything at the complaint of the mother. Only because of the lawsuit now, they know they're in trouble, were those two characters subsequently removed.
Now, was there an arrest?
There's no mention of arrest, because that sounds like a crime to me. You know, I wish Julian was here, because Julian, our legal expert, and as you well know, Eric Josie, those are the two guys we lean on for legal advice. So
I don't know. I'm pretty sure there's some child abuse charges there.
Yes.
Trust me, if I went to a white child, stood up next to a garbage can, told her to take something out of the garbage can and eat it, I'm being arrested.
Yes.
Trust me.
It's a crime it's definitely a crime if you do that to a white child.
You know, so that's highly unfortunate. Real quick, I wanted to just mention real quick, Michael, there was an acquittal of a Tulsa, Oklahoma man who was involved in the road rage case of a sister, Nathaniel Robert Cole Chilcote, 31 years old, was arrested on February 4th, 2020, for the murder of Lakia Gaines, who's 24 years old. There was a road rage incident where she allegedly, both of them got out their car. He got out of the car with his weapon, with a gun that he hid. She got out of the car with a bottle of water, or she went back into the car, got a bottle of water and threw the water at his car. He subsequently took out his weapon, pointed it at her, and shot and killed her. And they're saying this was an instance of stand your ground. Now, of course, he said that he felt threatened. I don't know how you feel threatened with a bottle of water, but he was just vindicated in court. A jury refused to convict him. And I think this is just another preposterous instance of an abuse of this particular stand your ground law, which has become very dangerous for African Americans, where white citizens can just shoot and kill you unarmed, not with a weapon, and say, like police officers say, I was in fear of my safety. So we have a 24-year-old sister who's now lost her life and will, at this point, unless it's an appeal, receive no justice for throwing a bottle of water at the individual's car.
Well, are we surprised?
No, sir.
When all is said and done, Du Bois said it best at the turn of the century. He said the 20th century, the problem with the 20th century will be race. And now we in the 21st century, the problem with the 21st century is still race, because white people are not willing, never have and never will be willing to give up power. Whatever we've gotten, we've earned it, we fought for it, and you got to continue to be vigilant, and you literally have to be, to borrow Utrice Leeds' words, ruthless to preserve it. If you are anything less than obsessive and ruthless, it will be taken. The same way they gutted the Civil Rights Act, they are now going to take back anything they could take back. And certainly those castle laws that you mentioned, stand your ground laws, those are all made to protect non-law enforcement people. In other words, they are built-in reasons that a police officer, correction officer, court officers, parole officers, probation officers, they have built-in protections to justify senseless slaughter. But now, as even civilian whites, they have built-in laws to allow them to kill Black people. And these castle laws, commonly called stand your ground laws, they use it.
All right. We want to go on a lighter note real quick, Mike. I think we're heading towards the close of the program. A lighter note, as some of our viewers might have seen, there's a documentary on the career of Janet Jackson, who's the sister of the famous Jackson 5 family. There's a documentary highlighting her career. Michael, you want to make some mention of our sister, who's a great entertainer, had an extraordinary career, and was a very talented, not only a singer, songwriter, but also an actress. And she's fine as well. What did you want to say about our sister?
No, I was just joking in our pre-production meeting about Janet Jackson, but I will say that one thing came out that I really appreciated is that she blew away all those myths, lies, misconceptions about her father. They all talked about for years, for the past 2 or 3 decades, about how he was an ironclad dictator in the house. They all said there would be no Jackson 5, there would be no Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson if it wasn't for their father. So I was glad and appreciated the fact that she made it crystal clear, and the other brothers, who came on the show, they all said the same thing consistently, that their father was the mainstay. He was the centerpiece. He's the one that brought it all together and forced greatness out of Michael. He did not tolerate mediocrity, so he made them. This was a strong Black father that had a 2-bedroom house and raised a whole house full of children in a 2-bedroom. I don't know who stayed where, but he kept that family together, and they're still united and together to this day. And that's based on him, and they all look like him, by the way. And just want to give kudos to that Black man who kept the family together and made them millionaires, multi-millionaires many times over.
Right. She had a tumultuous period in her life when she appeared in the Super Bowl, and there was a uniform mishap when she was on stage with Justin Timberlake. And I know they attempted to bury her at that particular time. You know, accidents do happen. Everybody know accidents happen, whether or not some daughter was an accident or not. I know that was a very tumultuous period in her life. And, you know, looking at the documentary, I also applauded her for supporting her brother when he was bombarded with allegations that wound up being false, that she stood by her brother and she never left his side in spite of the fact that, you know, you had many rocks being thrown at him. So, you know, she had a very successful career. She, you know, and this very successful family. So it was a very interesting documentary. Some of you who haven't seen it, you know, you can see it. It's on regular TV. Any closing comments on that?
No, I'll just say that when all is said and done, what I took away from it, it was I think a 4-part thing, and was that the maligned one in that family for years was the father, and now she made it crystal clear that he was one hell of a father and one hell of a man. And she made the point, she said something about discipline without love is tyranny. And certainly she wasn't terrorized. That was a lie all about her father being the dictator. He was a no-nonsense person that did not accept mediocrity. He demanded greatness, and they gave greatness. The more they gave, the more he pulled out of them more greatness, and they became the top drawer in the country. And certainly Michael Jackson was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Janet Jackson is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And the other Jacksons, they're all millionaires. And that's because he might have denied them playing basketball and running around the streets and all that stuff. But Gary, Indiana is a mess, and he wasn't going to give his children to the streets. He was strict on them. And that's why they came, they was above what you would see when you look at the rest of Gary, Indiana.
Right, okay, and this might be reminiscent of a movie that's out also with the Williams sister and their father, you know, because I know he was a very strong man as well, and he produced 2 giants in the world of tennis. But we're at the closing time period. Michael, closing comments?
Yeah, just want to just say that just love the affection, and everybody's asking about Julian Harper. Julian Harper is well. The brother's doing good, taking care of his business. And just want to say to Brother Cliff Hollingsworth and to Grant Weatherspoon, y'all were great, you know, in remembering Troy Patterson, a fallen police officer that while taking police action was wounded extremely seriously, but he still survives to this day. And big ups to Cliff Hollingsworth and Grant Weatherspoon for continuing his memory.
Okay, and when you talk about Cliff Hollingsworth and Graham Weatherspoon, you talk about the foundation of 100 Blacks in law enforcement who care. I love both of those brothers. Both of those brothers will always be dear to me, and they've offered so much. You know, a lot of people see Eric, you know, a lot